Welcome to Everything on Everything. Today we are taking a political route and looking at the latest major presidential elections that have taken place. Yes, the all-famous United States presidential elections. But before we continue, please subscribe to our channel and switch on the notification bell to support and get more of our videos. We will be looking at how Joe Biden actually won the elections. And because we know that so many of us do not really understand the US presidential election procedures, we will certainly have to explain the somewhat complicated process and what it is all about. So, the elections, how do they work? Let's get right to it. When you watch most of the presidential elections, you hear a lot of what do the national polls look like, as in you get the gist. But these national polls don't actually tell you what is going on. They don't tell you who's going to win. So throw the national polls right out the window because they don't matter. Most democracies around the world elect their head of state with a popular vote, so whoever gets the most votes wins. However, in America, things are done a little differently. America is the only country that picks its president using something called the Electoral College. It is made up of delegates from each US state. When Americans vote for a president, they are actually voting for who their state will vote for. This is why often when someone wins the presidency, they don't win by popular votes. However, majority of Americans do not like the system and have not for a very long time. Talk about being there for the people. Does not seem fair though, because this is always tending to shift power more towards the others. The question now is, why does the US still use the Electoral College and who benefits from it? The Electoral College is based on how people are represented in Congress, where each state has a number of representatives based on its population size, and every state also gets 2 senators. So for example, let's look at Texas, which has a huge population, and Vermont, which conversely has a very small number. Texas has about 36 representatives in Congress, whereas Vermont only has 1 representative in Congress. The representatives in both states each closely represent the same number of people, but in the Electoral College, the state only gets the same number of delegates as their congressional representatives, plus 2 for each senator. So basically, Texas has 38 electoral votes, and Vermont has 3. But this combination makes the number of people each delegate represents so much more different between the 2 states. Let's explain further. In Texas, 1 electoral delegate vote represents 3 times the amount of people as 1 in Vermont, and that makes each individual person's vote in Vermont a lot more powerful than you think. The Electoral College makes inconsistencies like this all over the country. So the winner of the presidential election is the candidate who gets 270 or more of this Electoral College votes. So that is how the president gets elected in the United States. Quite complicated, isn't it? Let's get deeper into explanation. During these Electoral College voting procedures, most of these votes come down to swing votes. Swing votes are votes that are seen as potentially going to any number of candidates in the election. Simple explanation. These are votes that have a decisive influence on the results of the poll. And if you still do not get it, basically, the votes of a certain state swing back and forth every day, so it can be anyone's game at this point. I think that's as simple as this can be explained. For example, states like New York and Florida are swing states, as votes tend to swing back and forth. Possible reasons for this are because of shifting demographics and other related issues in the states. This is why most of the candidates focus their campaigns on these states. Let's just say as the votes swing, the people do the same thing too. So, additional information about these electoral votes. The Electoral College was created by the Farmers of the United States Constitution as an alternative to electing the president by popular vote or by Congress. Because let's face it, if this wasn't the case, the US wouldn't have a lot of its former presidents become presidents in the first place. However, Both electoral parties have tried to fight against this alternative way of electing presidents, but have failed. Now that we have somewhat an understanding of how the voting procedure works, let us get back to how Joe Biden became the 46th president of the United States of America. Joe Biden certainly did make an impact during these 2020 elections, releasing the country from 4 years of Donald Trump's desire for division and chaos in the America. Biden's win was widely anticipated and stubbornly doubted. Though 2020 turned out to be one of the craziest years the world has ever had, it didn't stop the elections from happening. Knowingly, America has had one of the highest number of COVID-19 related deaths and cases. The country needed a more serious leader to take over, and this was his chance. COVID-19 made the country long for a leader with competence and empathy, and the difference between the two candidates was in Joe's favor. The game took a turn and it became a race between an experienced statesman versus an unskilled president, a leader who comforted COVID-19 stricken families versus a celebrity who mocked the virus, a candidate who pledged to heal a nation versus an obnoxious individual who had nearly ripped a country apart. The start to a great election went from subtle to vicious real quick. Messages alone do not win the elections. Everybody knows campaigns do. The visuals matter. Biden's shaky operation grew into perhaps one of the most sophisticated digital apparatus in American political history. Starting off with an emaciated team, the candidate most famous for his hugs and handshakes was unfortunately forced to campaign from home. This was a huge change of scenery. However, this was not a setback, but something that had worked in his favor. The campaign had to think outside of the box and built a state-of-the-art digital shop, becoming the first in US history to run a general election campaign nearly and entirely online, using a huge amount of data-driven texts, calls, social media groups, you name it. And before you know it, Biden's campaign was off to the races and took a great shift. While Trump, on the other hand, planned rallies in the midst of a serious pandemic. These just backfired greatly. Joe Biden's most important move was to stay out of Trump's way, which was the best decision. Donald Trump started his 2020 on a bad note, as he was the third president to ever be impeached and went on to mismanage the whole COVID-19 pandemic, which has killed more than 230,000 Americans. At this point, Trump was his own enemy and defeated himself. And Biden was certainly lucky to have Donald Trump as his opponent, and after 3 presidential campaigns, 36 years in the Senate, 8 years as vice president, after a long time of being almost the right person at the right time, Joe Biden is finally the man of the moment, a moment that took nearly 4 years in the making. Biden joining the presidential elections was like a soldier stepping onto the final battle. Joe Biden launched his campaign with a video titled "The Fight Against Trump, a Battle for the Soul of This Nation." He described Trump's 4 years as an irregularity. He said, and I quote, "But if we give Donald Trump 8 years in the White House, he will forever and fundamentally alter the character of this nation, who we are, and I cannot stand by and watch that happen." End quote. Biden sure did stand by his word and proved everyone wrong. The campaign kept insisting that if they could simply make it to South Carolina, they would be back in the running after a setback. With the help of an endorsement from the South Carolina representative Jim Clyburn, Biden carried the state with decisive support of black voters. Biden certainly had a lot of momentum, but little money. So, even as he stuck to his message, he shook up his team. He replaced his campaign manager, Greg Schultz, with a veteran campaign hand, Jen O'Malley Dillon, who served as deputy campaign manager for Obama's 2012 re-election and had helped modernize the Democratic Party's data program. It was not that she had to rebuild, she just had to construct something barely resembling a typical campaign. In this case, there would be no multitudes of supporters, no big rallies, no fancy fundraisers. It was deemed too dangerous for the 77-year-old candidate to campaign in person. So for months, he held virtual events and live-streamed speeches from his home. And obviously, Trump mocked him, but Biden stuck to his plan and did not sidestep. The world of politics is hard, and the pandemic was in a lot of ways beneficial to Biden. The fact that Trump kept his failures in the headlines in the midst of a plague like a recession and a national reckoning over systemic racism, Trump's errors set the bar very low. In the end, his plan worked. Biden's campaign won over the specific states they needed and lost the states they did not, and kept America calm through a long, unbearable campaign week. It turns out that Biden had been right all along. America didn't want a revolution, it just wanted to heal from 4 years of chaos and division. So, he stuck to his stable campaign in unstable times and a comforting message in a disquieting moment. Joe Biden completed his slow and steady march to victory, exactly as he said he would. Well, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, comment, and switch on the notification bar for more of our videos.